Hello, my name is Austin Habish, the founder of Think Catholic, and you're listening to the Summa podcast, where we study St. Thomas Aquinas' Summa Theologiae in a way simple and insightful for anyone to understand. The Summa podcast is brought to you by Think Catholic. Taking 2 questions of the Summa a day, we'll seek to summarize St. Thomas's responses, discovering the brilliance of Aquinas. And his Catholic faith is day 83. So let's get started. We're covering today questions 44 and 45 of the Prima Secundae, that is, of the effects of fear and of daring. The translation that I always use in these podcasts is one generously provided to me by Ave Maria Press, the 5-volume set translated by the Fathers of the English Dominican province, which you can now get at a discounted price from Ave Maria Press's site by typing in the code SUMMA10. And so here we go. Article 1, whether fear causes contraction. Does the passion of fear come along with a physical contraction or shrinking? And Aquinas holds that it does. First of all, because all of the passions entail a physical change. And secondly, because, he will argue, those physical changes have a kind of likeness to the essence of the passion itself, which is eliciting it. So just as fear itself is a kind of recoiling or shrinking back of the appetite away from the apprehended impending perceived evil, so too the bodily change corresponding to it is a kind of contraction. In his words, the very imagination that causes fear, there ensues a certain contraction in the appetite. It is in resemblance to this contraction which pertains to the appetite of the soul that in fear a similar contraction of heat and vital spirits towards the inner parts takes place in regard to the body. Article 2, whether fear makes one suitable for counsel. If we are asking if fear makes one a better counselor, we must say that this is not the case. Passions skew judgment, generally speaking. As Aquinas says, when a man is affected by a passion, things seem to him greater or smaller than they really are. Thus, to a lover, what he loves seems better. To him that fears, what he fears seems more dreadful. Consequently, owing to the want of right judgment, every passion, considered in itself, hinders the faculty of giving good counsel. But if, on the other hand, we are asking if fear is suitable for inducing men to seek counsel, this is definitely the case. We are more likely to seek assistance when the obstacle in front of us appears beyond our capacity. And this is the kind of object precisely which elicits fear, the future evil perceived in that instance to be beyond our strength. Article 3, whether fear makes one tremble. In a sentence from Aquinas, in fear, there takes place a certain contraction from the outward to the inner parts of the body, the result being that the outer parts become cold, and for this reason trembling is occasioned in these parts. Article 4, whether fear hinders action. On the contrary, St. Paul says, therefore, my beloved, as you have always obeyed, so now, not only as in my presence, but much more in my absence, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. And since St. Paul would not recommend fear, if it was always and necessarily detrimental to us, then there must be a way in which fear can assist our action. And it can if that fear is moderate. That is the qualification St. Thomas adds. Moderate fear can cause a kind of focused awareness, precaution, discernment, which can then aid our action, especially since, as we've already mentioned, fear motivates us to seek counsel as well. And now on to question 45 on daring. Article 1, whether daring is contrary to fear. The essential difference between daring, or the passion of courage, not to be confused with the virtue of courage, and fear is the following from St. Thomas. Fear turns away from the future hurt on account of its victory over him that fears it, whereas daring turns on threatened danger because of its own victory over that same danger. So the object of fear is somewhat the same between courage and fear, the perceived impending evil, yet it is considered under contrary aspects. If the impending evil is perceived as resistible, able to be overcome, the passion elicited in us is daring. But if the impending evil is perceived as non-resistible, the passion elicited will be fear. Therefore, in response to our article, we can respond in the affirmative that daring is the contrary of fear, and that on account of their objects. Article 2, whether daring ensues from hope. As Aristotle wrote, those who are hopeful are full of daring. Because daring's object is, in St. Thomas's words, an evil to which, in the estimation of the daring man, the good of victory is conjoined. And so clearly it results from hope. Hope as the perception of the arduous good as attainable can then lead one to feel like they can take head on the evils surrounding that good. And because the feeling of pursuing impending evils as possible to be overcome is the feeling of daring, and because we pursue evils for the sake of the good we hope in both of these ways, hope is the cause of daring. Article 3, whether some defect is the cause of daring. Defect is certainly a cause for fear in the manner we described in our previous episode, but defect can only be the cause of daring if it is a defect, let's say, of drunkenness, or perhaps the defect meaning that we've been wounded by another, which both of those in their own ways can be a cause of daring. The first, drunkenness by impairing reason and thereby bringing about an unawareness of obstacles, can give reason for hope and then daring. The second, by being wounded, might give the one who was wounded the feeling that he or she has justice on their side to aid them. As Aristotle wrote, those who have been wronged are courageous because they think that God comes to the assistance of those who suffer unjustly. So not directly, but in an inadvertent way, defect can sometimes be a cause of daring. Article 4 in our last article, whether the brave are more eager at first than in the midst of danger. Aquinas' response to this article provides us with a distinction that is normally called the distinction between the antecedent versus the consequent passions. Antecedent passions are those which follow sensual apprehension simply, and so they are not, strictly speaking, voluntary or consciously willed. On the other hand, consequent passions are those which do follow the apprehension of the intellect. They follow an act of the will. For example, a man may feel fear at first glance at a burglar trying to climb into his house because it startles him and is perceived as an impending evil to him, but then later realize that he can confront and then positively choose to confront this forthcoming evil, and because of those acts of the intellect and will, begin to feel courage. Antecedent passions precede an act of the will, and consequent passions are those which in some way are informed by the intellect and will. And with that distinction in mind, returning to our present article, a man may feel the passion of daring antecedently, and then in the midst of danger feel otherwise, as he learns that the dangers are greater than he had apprehended immediately. But the opposite can also occur. Such was our example with the burglar. A man may not feel courage at first, but then based on a heroic thought and his own volition begin to feel courage all of a sudden. So at some times the brave men are more eager at first than in the midst of danger, but sometimes the opposite is the case. Which brings us to the close of another episode. We've just finished covering questions 44 and 45 of the Prima Secundae, that is, of the effects of fear and of daring. My name is Austin Habish with Think Catholic, and I cannot wait to see you tomorrow.